On Tech News Today, Facebook's controversial psych experiment on users was okay because it was in the terms of service. Or was it? Plus, shopping comes to Twitter. Samsung suppliers are still abusing workers. The new wireless speaker doesn't plug into the wall, and it doesn't use batteries either. All that and much more coming up right now.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Tuesday, July 1st, 2014. This episode is brought to you by ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter makes hiring faster, easier, and cheaper. Post your job to 50-plus job boards with one click. Try ZipRecruiter for a free 4-day trial now at ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. That's ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. And by Personal Capital. With Personal Capital, you'll finally have all your financial life in one place and get a clear view of everything you own. Best of all, it's free. To sign up, go to personalcapital.com/TNT. Tech News Today is the show where we talk about the tech news with the journalists who report it. Welcome to Tech News Today. I'm Mike Elgan. Jason Howell is off today, and Anthony Nielsen is filling in for Jason. Our co-anchor today is Joe Panettieri. Welcome, Joe.
Hey, Mike. Always good to be here on a Tuesday.
You know, I see you on Twit almost every day, it seems like. Yesterday, you were on Twiat. This week in Enterprise Tech. The appearance is great. You know, I was telling you before the show that I'm a huge Twiat fanboy, and it's so great to see you on that show. You've been on, what, twice so far?
Yeah, twice now. You know, Padre's so colorful, and the guy's just brilliant. So it's good to sort of share the stage with him. And, you know, the conversation has been great because I grew up more on the enterprise IT side, working with Information Week, CMP Media, Ziff Davis Media. So sort of go back, quote unquote, go back to the future for me. And the enterprise coverage is a lot of fun.
Well, I enjoyed your appearance yesterday. You had a lot of really interesting things to say. I learned a lot. And I recommend that everybody go find Twiat on the twit.tv site and watch that show if you haven't already. So that was a great appearance, and I hope you're on the show again soon. And
yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
All right, let's jump into the news. We reported yesterday that Facebook had manipulated the news feeds of nearly 700,000 users for a psychological study. The experiment made news feeds either more positive or more negative to test whether this would affect what people post on Facebook. The company was slammed with criticism for doing this, but a consensus formed that it was more or less okay because Facebook's terms of service allowed it. All users theoretically agree to the terms of service as a condition for using Facebook. But now, an exclusive by Kashmir Hill on Forbes revealed that Facebook didn't add language about research until months after the study was conducted. Kashmir Hill joins us to talk about her exclusive. Welcome, Kashmir.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, can you review for us the facts around Facebook's mood study? What did they do exactly, and why did they do it?
So this happened 2.5 years ago in January 2012, and for a week, they reduced the positive content in about 155,000 users' feed, reduced the negative content in another group to see if it affected their mood as measured by whether they posted more positive or negative material. Some people think that's bad science. In that what you're posting doesn't necessarily reflect your mood. But the bigger questions were around, this was done with academic researchers, so there are questions about whether there's informed consent here from the subjects of the study, and then about whether Facebook had kind of crossed the line by doing a psychological study on unsuspecting users without asking them explicitly beforehand or telling them about it afterwards.
Yeah, this is Joe. Kashmir, are we also starting to see a little bit of revisionist history here? I mean, did Facebook's terms of service actually allow for this, or did they sort of go back and rewrite history in terms of what they're up to here?
So a lot of journalists, as we were telling the story, we pointed at the data use policy and we criticized it because we said, oh, you know, the word research only appears in a very small part of this very large data use policy that most people don't read anyways. But then when I looked back at the data use policy that was in place in January 2012, even that little bit about research wasn't there. Facebook says that doesn't matter, that you know, they tell users, we'll use your information for lots of different things, including improving our service, improving our products. And so they say that this study was part of improving Facebook, figuring out what makes, you know, their users happier and more engaged with the site.
One of the interesting things about this, and you pointed it out in your article, is that this whole research that they did, again, as you found out, which happened without the word research being part of the terms of service, happened in January 2012, which is 2 months after Facebook settled a complaint with the FTC about, quote, unfair and deceptive practices around user privacy. So they were in hot water at the time for abusing users' privacy, and they just jumped right in with this study. And then it sounds to me, I mean, there's no way to really know unless Facebook reveals what really happened, but it sounds to me like somebody within Twitter, a lawyer or something, found out they did the study and then went back and checked the terms of use, and then found that there was nothing in there that really specifically said that it was okay for users to be treated like lab rats. So they added the point that you pointed out about research. Personally,
and that I can't speak to. I don't know what happened internally, but they were being watched by the FTC right now during this period. And the other thing that's come out really today is that there was no age filter on the study. So this included users under the age of 18, theoretically. And the FTC usually gets like pretty upset about how Facebook treats teens. And so I'm sure that's going to make things more complicated for them.
I'm sure it will. Now, this concept of informed consent, personally, I believed even before I found out from your article that they didn't have the word research in their terms of service. I didn't think, even if they did have it, I wouldn't think that that's informed consent. People, like, what is informed consent? What does informed mean? If people don't read the terms of service, or even if they read it and don't remember it, and I'm certain that far more than 99% of Facebook users don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of the terms of service. They are not informed about what's in the terms of service. How can that be informed consent in a way that satisfies a scientific requirement for informed consent? This sounds just like, forget about, user privacy. This just sounds like really bad science and possibly abusive science.
Yeah, and so there's a separate kind of drama around the fact that this study did kind of go through. So in the 1970s, we created institutional review boards because scientists were doing too many creepy studies, like getting subjects to think that they were shocking someone to death. So now most academic studies that involve human research have to go through an ethics board first. And this study actually got looked at by an ethics board, but the ethics board said, oh, it's fine because the data set is coming from Facebook. Our academic researchers aren't touching it. So they didn't really even look at the idea of informed consent because that's not something that's needed when the research is only being done by a corporation.
Plausible deniability.
Yeah,
they can't be allowed to.
Complicated.
Yeah, they can't. It would be a horrible precedent if that made it okay, because then corporations would be doing all the, corporations would be shocking people to death, and then the researchers would be like, hey, wasn't us. We just got the data from a corporation.
Well, defenders say that, all companies are doing A/B testing all the time, where they put something in front of you and then put something different in front of you and see how, which thing you respond more to, and that's a kind of psychological study as well. But I just see what Facebook was doing as different because you're like actually measuring people's mood and putting negative things in front of them, hoping that it causes them to feel negatively. And that just seems like it's in a different category to me.
Did the researchers try to distance themselves even further by basically claiming, hey, we weren't even aware of the individual names and the individual identities in this research? We really had a top-level look at the data rather than individual looks at each piece of data?
Yeah, so Cornell said, the academic researchers, well, what's complicated is academic resersachers did help design the study. So they had their hands on this pretty early on, but it was run by Facebook and the data was collected by Facebook and Facebook analyzed it, and then the academic researchers helped write the paper. The academic researchers have not been talking to the press. They have basically told all journalists, oh, talk to Facebook. So Facebook is controlling the press around this right now for the most part, beyond that statement from Cornell University regarding their IRB approval.
One of the fascinating things to me about this whole scenario is that Facebook is very, very aware of just how they use algorithms to filter what you see in your news feed. Something like out of every 1,500 things that you could see from your friends and family on Facebook, they show you about 300. They basically determine what your relationships are. They say, well, you're not really that interested in Aunt Mildred because you never click like on any of her stuff, and you don't look at, and so they essentially just cut Aunt Mildred out of the feed without telling you, and you just think that Aunt Mildred isn't posting. And this is something Facebook is very used to, but users aren't really aware of it. And I think that's driving a lot of the outrage here. Is not just that they're doing it for science, but just that they're doing it, that they feel comfortable always mucking about with what they show you and what they don't show you.
And that's part of how Facebook is defending itself, is saying, all users know that our algorithms are mysterious and we're always changing what you're seeing. So this is just us doing it again. But yeah, I think there are a lot of people have gotten used to this, and they've kind of gotten over the outrage of, I don't understand why Facebook shows me what I see. But the idea that they would change your newsfeed to change your mood, that seems to be kind of a new level of outrage for users.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead,
Have we heard anything from any other of the social media platforms out there today, or are they all just going mum and sort of hiding in the corner and not really getting involved in this conversation?
I have not seen any of the rest of the companies commenting. And then you have to wonder, so part of the reason why we found out about this is that Facebook went and published it in an academic journal and made it public. And kudos to them for doing that. Other companies may well be doing really interesting psychological studies on users, but they don't put it in an academic journal where we can read it.
There are a couple of things that Facebook does that I think are very kind of disingenuous. One of them is that they used to call their algorithm for sorting things Edgerank. That was the name of it. Everybody wrote articles. I wrote articles about Edgerank, Edgerank this, Edgerank that. And they pulled a fast one and kind of said, you know what, we don't call it Edgerank anymore. It doesn't have a name anymore. So now there's a lot less press on their algorithm because it doesn't have a name. It's a really kind of like Pentagon spin kind of an action, I think, by Facebook to have the algorithm that has no name, so you can't talk about it. That is a kind of a weird thing that they did, and it's just discouraging. The way that they apologize. The New York Times had a piece in this, and I'm always blogging about this fact. Facebook apologizes like every month for something, and they seem to have this sort of corporate attitude where they just go in and they do stuff. Oh, we're just going to mess with people's emotions and moods, and then if we get caught, we'll apologize. And they're just apologizing constantly for all these things. They apparently have as their corporate policy, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. They don't ask permission. They just do stuff, and then when they get caught, they apologize, and it's supposed to be okay. And that kind of bothers me a bit. I think that now that the New York Times is writing about it, Mike Isaac, I believe, is the author of that piece that appeared today. I think that people will start to call them on their essentially policy of just doing things to people, and then if they get caught, they apologize.
I actually disagree, and I think Micah Isaac is about 3 years too late on that story. I've been covering Facebook since 2008 on privacy, since I discovered when Mark Zuckerberg's photos got exposed to the world because of the December 2009 Facebook privacy settings change that pushed a bunch of our private material public. And I think Facebook has slowed down. When this January 2012 study happened, Facebook's motto was still move fast and break things. And now they broke out that clunky motto that's move fast with stable infra. And I'm seeing when they roll out new features, like the feature that listens to what's going on around you while you write a status update to identify the music you might be listening to or the TV show you might be listening to. They're starting to make these things opt-in. So that you're not automatically hit with the feature. And I do think Facebook has started to be more careful around privacy and around user information. So this did happen in 2012, in January 2012, and we may be still seeing kind of the old Facebook. But maybe I'm more optimistic or too optimistic about the changes that have been made at Facebook.
Well, I like your optimism, and I hope you're right. And I also like to point out that it looks like you're in the Johnny Ive dungeon. You're bathed in white light. I think you're in that secret underground room that Apple has where they keep Johnny Ive chained up. Anyway, I want to thank you so much for your exclusive. It's great that you're in there, like going after that's good reporting. When you go after the basic assumptions, the basic facts that everybody's reporting on, and you reveal something that is a huge part of the story. I really appreciate your exclusive, and I want to thank you for coming on Tech News Today.
Well, thank you for acknowledging it. All
right. Well, Kashmir Hill is at Forbes.com, and you can find her on Twitter at Kash Hill. That's KashHill. Well, in just a sec, we're going to tell you about Twitter's new button. But first, I want to tell you about how to hire the very best employees for your business or for your team. The problem with hiring people is that the best candidates are scattered all over the world, all over the internet, on social media, on all the job boards. There's so many, there are dozens and dozens of job boards. So what are you going to do? You're going to slog from job board to job board, posting and posting and posting, and then going back to figure out if anybody came back and replied to your post? No, that's the way that you used to do it 5 years ago. Now the way to do it is to use ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter will post all of your jobs to 50+ job sites at once. Plus, they'll post it on social networks like LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. They'll even add your company logo and your colors to make it look like an extension of your own brand and your own web pages, and that is far more professional as well. You know, but if you're gonna cast such a wide net, you're gonna get tons of candidates, many of which will be unqualified, and ZipRecruiter will help you with that as well. What they do is they automatically highlight the best candidates. It's really amazing because they can check to see who's really qualified and who isn't. Then you only have to go through the qualified candidates, not the unqualified ones. You can screen them, you can rate them, and hire the right person fast. So try ZipRecruiter and find out why they've been used by over 100,000 businesses. Right now, our listeners can try ZipRecruiter for a free 4-day trial by going to ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. I'm going to read that one more time. That's ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. And we thank ZipRecruiter for their support of Tech News Today. And we strongly recommend that if you hire people, you use ZipRecruiter. Well, Joe, tell us about Twitter's new button. It sounds like it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, you know, everyone could use a new button every once in a while, right, Mike? And Mike, do you consider yourself an impulse shopper?
Absolutely. If it's there, I want it. Especially if it's technology.
Well, if it's there and you want it, and it's only one button away, perhaps Twitter has something for you. Now, it looks like Twitter is preparing to serve impulse shoppers such as you, such as me, and I'm sure quite a few of our viewers and listeners today. Now, it looks like the microblogging service may allow online retailers to promote a Buy It Now button in their tweets. The potential e-commerce strategy may feature products from Fancy.com, that is, which curates cool products from numerous merchants. And of course, if Twitter's up to something here, it's certainly not going to be limited to one merchant. They're probably going to go real big. Now, to bring this conversation to life for us, we've got Kurt Wagner, who writes about social media over at Mashable. Kurt, good to have you on the board today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you joining us. Can you give us a little background here? What is this Buy It Now button? Or is this just a rumor? Or is this something that Twitter is certainly working on?
Well, it certainly appears to be something that Twitter's working on. The Buy Now button first showed up in a few tweets yesterday, and you showed the Recode story there. That was the first we heard of it, and we checked as well, and we were able to see the actual button included in the tweets, and they have since been removed. The button has since been removed, so it kind of implies that Twitter might be testing this, and perhaps it was, launched a little too early. When you clicked on the button, it didn't actually take you anywhere. So it just appeared in the tweet. But this has been rumored for a while that Twitter was going to make tweets shoppable. So the fact that this is coming to light isn't necessarily a huge surprise, although it's still interesting to see how they're going to ultimately roll something like this out.
It appears to me to be another example of Twitter following either Facebook or Google+. Google+ had the fancy Buy It Now buttons more than a year ago, and of course lots of other, but the Fancy is actually a really interesting site because they tend to be more forward thinking in terms of this sort of thing. They're often first out of the gate with social ways to buy things. And does anybody remember when Apple was strongly rumored to be interested in buying the Fancy, and it's sort of the whole deal kind of collapsed and it never happened. But I think this sort of thing is inevitable. I think that all of these social networks want to get to the point where they can be selling things because that's a huge way to monetize. Now, Kurt Wagner, do you follow Twitter is always testing things. Some of the tests show up and some of them don't. Do you have a sense of how many of their tests become real and how many of them just sort of fade away and never see the light of day?
I don't have a general idea in terms of numbers, but you're absolutely right. They are well known for experimenting with new products and tweaks to tweets, the way that users engage with tweets. We just reported last week that they are testing a new feature where people can retweet with comments. So essentially, almost have 140 characters to respond to someone else's tweet, which is something that they haven't really been able to do before. So it's hard to tell exactly who makes the final decision in terms of, is this a product that they want to continue to push forward to all users, or is it something that kind of gets killed along the way? And I think that was something that has been talked about a lot in the last 6 months. And their head of product, Michael Sippy, left the company in January. And some of the rumors were that the reason he left was he wasn't able to really push the product forward in the way that it needed to be done. And that's an issue for a company like Twitter, who is now a public company and has to respond, of course, to investors and users. So I don't have a number for you in terms of how many go through and how many are killed, but they're definitely testing a lot of new features all the time.
Now, Kurt, you bring up an important angle here, and that's the financial angle. I think it was a few months ago where Twitter put out its latest financials, and there was some concern at the time, number one, of executive level turnover, and then number two, slowing growth in terms of the user base. I think the numbers at the time were 241 million active users in Q4, up only about 3.8%. And if you look at Facebook by comparison, Facebook was 1.23 billion users. That's according to the Wall Street Journal. Again, 1.23 billion for Facebook versus 241 million for Twitter. I'm wondering, as you look at this potential buy now strategy, could that be a way to better monetize the existing user base? If that user base isn't going to be in rapid growth mode, at least monetize what you got.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I don't think a new service or a new feature like this is necessarily going to bring on a whole slew of new users. I don't think people are going to join Twitter now that they may be able to buy something with one click. But as you mentioned, there are 240 plus million users already on the site, and they're used to seeing images in their feed. They're used to seeing advertisements in their feed. So simply adding a buy now button, especially a small button, which is what it appeared to be yesterday when we were looking at the tweets, I don't think it's very intrusive. And I don't think that people who are already on the service are going to see that button and be upset or be disappointed. I think that it, as you mentioned, is a perfect way to try and kind of bring a little bit more revenue out of what they already have using the service.
The downside, of course, is that by having so many ads and so many blatant e-commerce kind of things on there, they may turn users away and may actually stunt their growth, because really what people want out of Twitter is a super minimalist site where they can very rapidly get information and links and so on from celebrities and also their friends and colleagues. So I think that if they blow it and they load it up with all kinds of stuff that where you feel like you're always getting a sales pitch on Twitter, it may sort of squelch their growth, and that is a bad thing. Kurt Wagner is available at Mashable.com and also on Twitter at KurtWagner8. Kurt Wagner, thank you so much for joining us on Tech News Today.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
An internal Samsung audit of 100 part suppliers in China revealed that more than half, 59 of them, failed to adhere to minimum labor standards. Most of Samsung's Chinese suppliers failed to provide or enforce the use of safety equipment, failed to pay minimum wages, or failed to prepare for emergencies. A majority of these companies violated Chinese laws around overtime. Joe Panettieri, this is an ongoing problem with Chinese suppliers. Of course, the major companies like Apple often take the brunt of criticism for these sorts of abuses of employees in China and around the world as well. But China is a major factory of the world, if you will, and they have a lot of problems with abusing workers. And so last year, Samsung said that they were going to do something about it. They set in motion a new policy to clean all this up, and now they did an audit, and it didn't work. There's still rampant abuse. The good news, though, they didn't find any children working in factories, so that's progress.
Yeah, that's progress, and I think you see a few key trends here. Whether it's Samsung or Apple, you see a few things. Number one, It's always the supplier, right? It's never the company itself. It's our suppliers. We're having issues with our suppliers. And how do we know that? Because we're proactively doing these audits now. So I do think we're seeing progress. I do think the vendors deserve some credit for doing these audits and working with third parties at doing these audits, but it's still not going far enough. One of the things we saw, not only with Samsung, was over with Apple. Apple has worked with the Fair Labor Association, the FLA, to assess labor practices at partner facilities in China as well. And a late 2013 report, it saw some improvements there, which is great to hear. But one of the biggest issues that report found was these suppliers still abusing the employees in terms of overtime hours. Just I don't want to call it slave labor, but I don't want to say they're working them to death, but quite literally in some cases they may be working these people to death.
And that's the secret sauce for Chinese factories. I mean, let's face it. If they actually adhered to all of these standards, they wouldn't be so cheap. And they wouldn't be so fast, and they wouldn't have the other benefits that companies go to China for. You want to build something, you can build something like an iPhone. Where else can you take an idea and churn out hundreds of millions of devices that are really in top-notch, condition when they come off the factory line very quickly? They don't do that because they have supercomputers and this really, they do that on the backs of workers who are underpaid. Oftentimes they're children, they work overtime without pay, and that's how they do it and keep costs low. And it's really a sad thing. A lot of people like to keep this out of sight, out of mind, but I think that's a terrible idea. If we're going to enjoy these gadgets, we should applaud companies like Samsung who are trying to do something about it and actually make the lives of factory workers who make these gadgets less miserable.
Yeah, Mike, if I could just jump in with one more point on this story. There's an urban legend, and I never was able to confirm it, but there was an urban legend when President Obama went to Silicon Valley or had Silicon Valley leaders to the White House, and he was trying to figure out how to bring manufacturing back to the States. The late Steve Jobs was at that meeting, and he told him, look at the business model in China and in Asia. Basically, they build the houses next to the factories, and these people are on call 24/7. That work ethic, that business model is just not here in America anymore. And you know what? That may be a good thing. Who wants to have a business model like that here in America? It's not a healthy way to work. But on the other hand, how do we compete with that here in America? Really tough challenge to solve.
It's also a tough ethical issue because let's say you did move manufacturing from China to the United States or to somewhere else outside of China for the benefit of the workers. So now you're taking an abused worker and you're making them an unemployed person, and it's not necessarily true that that's better. But again, the best case scenario is that if we're going to be enjoying these really nice gadgets, that the employees have at least a minimum work standard and so on. But yeah, it's a difficult issue, and in fact, China has other issues with labor. The cost of labor is going up rapidly in China. They are actually having worker scarcity, and a lot of manufacturing is moving to Mexico and Brazil and elsewhere in the world, and that's probably a good thing. It's probably not a good thing that so much manufacturing happens in one single country. It should be distributed around the world. So really interesting situation, and again, it's great to see Samsung doing these sorts of audits and being public about it. So Joe, PayPal is doing something kind of odd with one of the email providers. What's happening?
Yeah. And you know what? This is another sign of the times where it's happened before and it's going to happen again, I would imagine. So, Mike, imagine you're a startup and you're using some crowdfunding to raise money and to pay your business bills, quite frankly, to pay your R&D, to hire people and really bring a product to market. So, Mike, congratulations. You got your company off the ground.
Thank you.
You're doing some crowdfunding out there. It looks great. And you know what? And your account is growing bigger and bigger. Sounds great. Here's the problem. PayPal has actually frozen your account. How would that feel?
It would hurt, Joe.
That
would be very painful. I don't like it.
All right. Well, that's the alarming problem, the challenge that's facing protonmail. Now, they're a secure email startup. They're based out in Switzerland, and basically they're raising $275,000. I believe they've raised that amount in roughly the last 2 weeks. And that company focuses on end-to-end email encryption. Here's the really interesting part. Forbes called it the only email system the NSA can't access. But here's the problem. Now that very company can't even access its own financial account over on PayPal because PayPal locked it down. Definitely cause for concern there. Mike, have you been watching this as well?
I have, and it is a potentially disturbing situation. PayPal essentially sent a note to protonmail saying, you know, essentially, we don't know that you're really legal. Do you have government permission to encrypt email? Wow. So since when do we need government permission to encrypt email? The whole point of encryption these days for many people is to keep the government's greasy paws off of our information. So it's like we really shouldn't have to get permission from the government to encrypt things, and PayPal shouldn't be enforcing the non-existent ban on encrypting things without government permission. This is crazy.
Yeah, not only is it crazy, so even if PayPal had the sneaky suspicion that something wasn't on the up and up with this company or another startup for that matter, here's the really strange part where it gets even stranger. This company is backed by MIT researchers, Harvard researchers, CERN researchers. So it's not as if this is some fly-by-night operation. These are well-respected people in the IT security community who are working on this company, and suddenly PayPal just allegedly locks the door. Now, I have not spoken with them directly, but all the coverage we're seeing, PayPal has not even, as of this morning, 6 a.m. Pacific, PayPal hasn't even issued a statement back to that company as to why they've officially locked the door on their account.
Well, I think they certainly owe us all an explanation and possibly an apology. And so we'll look for that, and we'll report a follow-up when, in fact, they do that, because they're going to have to do that. This is just pretty outrageous, and something has to be said about it by PayPal executives. Well, Google wanted the Supreme Court to rule on a lawsuit that claimed Google spied on people with its Street View cars. Yesterday, the court turned them down. I love this issue, Joe, because I have an axe to grind about the lawsuits that happened a couple of years ago with Google harvesting information. So the accusation is that Google's Street View cars, and this happened for 2 years, were going around and they were essentially recording data, as much data as they could from the Wi-Fi networks, the personal Wi-Fi networks of homes and businesses as they were driving around. They, mostly got gibberish, but they also, in some cases, got passwords. They got, data identifying the actual Wi-Fi networks. And, the intuition on this, I think, for any rational person is, yeah, that's terrible. They shouldn't be doing that. They shouldn't be reaching into people's homes and stealing information from people's Wi-Fi networks. So what's my beef with this, Joe? It's the problem is that that's not how the process works. Essentially, when you have a Wi-Fi network, your electromagnetic signals are going across the room from where the router is. They're penetrating the wall. They're going across the lawn. They're going across the sidewalk. They're going out in the street. And if you're driving by in a Street View car or any car, or you're walking by, you're riding a bike by, those very signals wash over you and penetrate your body. They go inside your car and out the other side. Google wasn't reaching into people's homes. These signals are being broadcast out into the world by people who own the Wi-Fi networks, and people should secure their networks. There's no question. We're talking about unencrypted, unsecured information in the case of Google. By the way, this was done by accident. Google executives didn't know what was happening. They called it a rogue engineer who was working on a little project and had this thing going on in the Street View software. But nevertheless, I think when you're trying to decide what's actually happening with this, to me it's similar to, like, if you put a TV set in your window facing the street and the sidewalk, and you put words on that, you put your password on the TV screen. The electromagnetic radiation within the visible spectrum is going out. If somebody takes a picture of your house or they write down your password, it's like you broadcast that out into the world. And so there's a certain responsibility with the people broadcasting their unencrypted information out into the street. And I don't think that Google is necessarily to be. I don't agree with the result of the lawsuit that the Supreme Court refused to hear, which is that they lost the lawsuit. I think Google has a good point. This is a unique case, and I don't think there was serious wrongdoing here. But I could be full of it. What do you think, Joe?
the thing I worry about is the classic excuse. It was a rogue employee, and you used that term deniable accountability earlier in the program, and I think this is another case of it. And I think physical walls are no longer there at all anymore. Whether it's your home, whether it's your office, all these networks extend everywhere. So, ultimately, I do think that. I'm a little worried in that more and more networks are just being set up impromptu. Whether it's even in my own house, I had an access point I didn't know about that got extended, and and Google comes driving by, and this is a rogue employee that the team Google didn't know about. Now they've got that deniability, and I do worry about that. I do give companies the benefit of the doubt, generally speaking, but one too often, and I'm going to feel burnt.
Yeah. I mean, it's wrong, clearly, to use somebody else's Wi-Fi, to hack somebody else's Wi-Fi. But it's not wrong, for example, when let's say you live in an apartment building and you look at the available Wi-Fi networks and you can see, oh, there's my neighbor's Wi-Fi. You see it on the list. Right. Is that wrong that you can see that? Because
I don't think it's but I'm not collecting it. I'm not storing it. I'm not creating a database of a list of those networks, and then what hours they're there may be times when they're password protected. There may be times when they're not. I'm not creating a database of business intelligence about all that information. Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Now, Joe, Staples is getting into an interesting business that's kind of unexpected. Can you tell us what's going on there?
Well, based on the story we were just talking about, maybe Google already knows by driving by the houses. But this is a story about the connected home and the fact that everyone, particularly retailers now, are jumping on the connected home bandwagon because retailers, even business retailers, are looking for a way to offset falling margins. Now, Staples is the latest example here. The struggling retailer is making a big consumer bet. The company is expanding its connected home initiative to 500 retail stores, Mike, and that's going to roll out by July 15th. That's up from 32 test stores that launched back on Black Friday last year, according to a report from GigaOM. Now, it begs the questions, do retailers like Staples plan to compete or cooperate with the connected home efforts over at Google, Apple, and Microsoft? Mike, what do you think here? There's a lengthy list of products and services that Staples is going to be offering on its store shelves in all these stores to try and create these connected homes. Do you see this as a co-opetition or competition for the giants? Apple, Google, Microsoft?
I think it depends. It depends on how closed Apple's system ends up being, how closed or open Google's ends up being. I suspect my guess would be that they will cooperate with whatever it is that's selling products. Right. To me, what this story tells me is that essentially, this is as good a time as any to proclaim that home automation is now mainstream. I mean, you've got Staples selling this stuff like it's, like it's like tape and pens and paper and, printer paper and stuff like that. This is quite an event in the evolution of home automation software. I mean, home automation has been a realm for extreme enthusiasts and extremely wealthy people. And, it's been rare. It's been a kind of an obscure sort of enthusiasm. And now it's becoming completely mainstream. We've seen new initiatives from Apple and Google recently, and from lots of other companies. And there are big efforts to bring all this stuff together. Some of the items on this list that are being supported and sold by Staples, Zigbee, for example, and some of these others. These are companies that are trying to all figure out who they play with, who they don't play with. But the bottom line is that having home automation and security combined, this is becoming super inexpensive, super easy to do, and it's, of course, all being controlled by smartphones and tablets and that sort of thing. So it's a wonderful time to be automating your home, and again, it's just great to see Staples doing this. With this in people's faces, people will start to say, oh, look, they're going to be exposed more to these things when they're in brick and mortar retail stores. Small businesses are going to embrace these technologies and these products. So it's really kind of a cool thing. And I think that at some point, it's going to be a rare when a home isn't like heavily automated with some of the products that Staples is selling.
Yeah, you know, the list, that ecosystem is roughly 150 different vendors now. So Staples seems quite serious about this. And it reminds me, it was a week or two ago that you and I were talking about the fall of Radio Shack and what can they possibly do to get back in the game. And when I saw the Staples coverage, it reminded me that, there's still room for innovation in this market. And to your point, Mike, it looks like the killer application, use a bad pun, the killer application here seems to be security, and security cameras seem to be taking off as part of this overall home hub initiative out of Staples. You know, the other one thing I'd add is, you know, can this potentially create stickiness between that home consumer and the consumer who wants to do some business-related work with Staples? And the early data results suggest that the answer is yes. Now, if you look at what Staples is saying out there, the average time that a person spends that's using this connected gear, they are using that app, visiting the Staples website an average of 8 times daily. And they're connecting 6 or 7 devices to the network. And to me, Mike, 6 or 7 actually sounds low. I mean, before the program today, I turned off roughly 15 IP devices in my house to make sure I had good broadband with you. So I don't know what you're thinking in terms of overall connectivity, but I would assume that you're going to be an early mover with this type of stuff.
I will, absolutely. And you really nailed what the issue is here. It's not getting more sales out of their existing customers. It's about attracting a different kind of customer like you, people who have all these different devices. This is, of course, an area in technology and consumer technology that Apple's done a great job locking up. They have, you know, iPhone users and Apple users and MacBook Pro buyers. These are the sweet spot of the market people. You know, these are the people who spend tons of money, buy expensive things. They're not so concerned about buying the cheapest thing. And they're repeat buyers. That's the kind of person that Staples wants to get into their stores, not people coming in and buying paper clips. They want to sell to people who buy lots and lots of gadgets that are pretty expensive, spend hundreds of dollars instead of, you know, dozens of dollars. And so it sounds to me like a good move, and I hope other companies like this follow suit. And you make a great point about Radio Shack. This is what Radio Shack should be doing. They should be the home automation store. I mean, imagine.
Absolutely.
So anyway,
imagine if they combine that with something like a Geek Squad, with where the team came to your house and wired it or unwired it for you, set everything up. Right,
like in the old days when Radio Shack employees knew what they were talking about. Nowadays, they tend to be like Best Buy employees. They have no idea what's going on. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But this was a missed opportunity for Radio Shack, and Staples picking it up and running with it. So glad to see that. In just a sec, we're going to tell you about a speaker system that doesn't get plugged into the wall, and it doesn't use batteries either. But first, I want to tell you about Personal Capital, one of our sponsors today. Personal Capital will help you get your financial life in order, and here's how they do it. You plug in all of the financial services that you use online, and then Personal Capital will show you all of your financial accounts on one single screen. It's easy to grasp when you see the graphs and charts that Personal Capital will show you about your entire financial picture. And that's the best way to get your finances under control, is to first understand it, to have an intuitive grasp of it, to see where you're spending too much or where you can spend more, where you need to invest, where you need to save. And it even shows you how much you're overpaying in fees and helps you reduce those fees. You get tailored advice on optimizing your investment. So why wait? Signing up takes just a minute, and it pays big dividends. Personal Capital gives you total clarity and transparency to make better investment decisions right away. To set up your free account, go to personalcapital.com/TNT. Personal Capital is free, and it's the smart way to grow your money. Just go to personalcapital.com/TNT. That's personalcapital.com/TNT. Well, a new Bluetooth-connected speaker called the Pelty plays music, or your favorite tech news netcast, without being plugged in. It doesn't use batteries either. The Pelty is powered by a single candle. A thermoelectric generator provides up to 5 hours of play from one candle. The Pelty is made from ceramic, glass, and wood, and it's being crowdfunded on Indiegogo. The price is $229, and they're expecting to ship it in November. Joe, I got to have one of these. I don't care. This looks like so cool.
It looks very cool. The one thing I was thinking of is I hope that crowdfunding isn't running through PayPal, because that candle could go out.
That's right.
But kidding aside,
or they, users could get burned. This could be bad.
They could. The company could. A lot of people could wind up getting burned here. But kidding aside, this looks wicked cool, as we might say out there. So I'll be keeping an eye on it as well.
And it's perfect for the coming zombie apocalypse when all the electrical grids are out and you still want to listen to your music. Well, Joe, we have one other news item. Tell us what's going on there.
You tell me. You're actually stumping me at this point.
Okay. All right. So we have one more story that's out from Long Island. It's related to Uber. You can use Uber to get a ride now in a helicopter. A startup called Blade, which already has its own app for ordering up helicopter rides across Long Island, New York, is partnering with Uber. They'll fly you from Manhattan to the Hamptons. You going to the Hamptons by helicopter in a couple of days, Joe? No?
Okay, so the one thing I will tell you here is, so I do live on Long Island. I live on the North Shore. And yes, we do get flybys from helicopters that are going out to the Hamptons. I've yet to hop a ride on one, unfortunately. My income level hasn't gotten me a ride yet.
Well, this would cost only $2,500, the low price of only $2,500. It's a one-day promotion, actually, and it's to promote their new relationship with Uber. And of course, Uber partnered with Liberty Helicopters for a different trial some time ago. But if the Blade trial goes well, according to Uber, they might add helicopter rides as a permanent part of the Uber service. So you might be able to call up the Uber app and say, do I want a taxi or do I want to get home really fast? And wouldn't that be cool for people who are rich and fly to the Hamptons by helicopter?
That would be super cool. And then you can almost see how this is going to play out in a few years, where it's not going to be a copter anymore. It'll be a drone. So we'll see.
That's right. That's right. You can send a sandwich or something. Send for a sandwich. That would be cool. Well, that's the tech news today. Joe Panettieri, thank you so much. You're our Tuesday co-anchor. And so
Mike,
I'm so glad you're here again today. And I hope to see you again here next Tuesday. I'm sure I will, but I hope to see you again on Twiet, as we talked about at the beginning of the show.
It's great to work with you and Padre on both shows. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Have a great 4th of July, and we'll see you next week. All right,
Stay safe.
All right, you can subscribe to Tech News Today on iTunes, YouTube, Feedly, Yahoo, RSS, or many other options. Choose your favorite way to subscribe at twit.tv/TNT. You can follow us on Twitter at Tech News Today TV, and please join our Google Plus community and also circle our Google Plus page. Just search Google Plus for Tech News Today. And please send us an email. We want to hear from you. Just send it to tnt@twit.tv. Don't miss our evening newscast, Tech News Tonight at 4 p.m. Pacific tonight, and every weeknight right here on the Twit Network. My name's Mike Elgan. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.